Okay. So, um, welcome again, just like we do every week. Welcome to another week of Think Up Thursdays. Excited for everyone to be here. For those that are watching this later, we appreciate it. We've got a few people on. Angela, Danielle, usually a couple of people jump on at the end. But today, Michael, well, you know what? Before we start that, I will say that we may have less people today because different people have different spring breaks, and that's what's going on right now. I know that our spring break is next week, and even in the Dallas Fort Worth area, they have different spring breaks. And I know that there's a place we like to go visit in Oklahoma, and they have like four different states right by it, and they have like 5 or 6 weeks of different spring breaks. Uh, I actually, personally speaking of spring break, prefer it to be a little bit later, so it's a little bit warmer for spring break. So it's like when you go to the beach, you want to take your kids to the beach, but the water's too cold to get in because I'm old and a big wimp. So um, anyway, we will not be having a call next week. So we will figure out how to do that because I will be gone and we've got spring break and we want to do stuff with our kids. That being said, today we're going to switch it up a little bit. We've talked a lot about, um, you know, converting leads and how to have the best conversations and overcoming objections and virtual appointments. And these are all things that we do at a very high level. But we're going to kind of go back to basics a little bit and just talk about different negotiating tactics that real estate agents should be using. And, if anyone wants to chime in, what works best for them. I also feel like we need to talk about a little bit with the NAR settlement and how these changes have affected how we communicate commission. And I think that there are a million different ways that people are doing this, and we're all getting a lot of feedback on that. So, yeah, so let's get started right away. And so, Michael, do you want to set that up at all?
Yeah, so what we're going to really focus on today are, some of the things that work for us in our market, some of the things that we've learned about how we negotiate and where we seek success. And there are really a handful of things that we want to focus in on. But I was actually typing into the chat. Again, every time that we have these conversations, I want to make sure that we're not assuming that we have all of the answers. A lot of this is just sharing our perspective and what's worked with us, but also a means by which to collaborate. And so always look for people's participation. But I am curious if people could go into the chat and then just say, do you feel like negotiating is one of the strengths of your business? Have you seen it enough and seen enough examples that you feel like you know how to navigate negotiating, or is it something that you feel like could use some more help in any specific component? And really, what we're going to focus in on are things like how to build rapport with the agents, how to leverage that rapport into leverage for your clients, how to really game plan with your clients on what those offers are going to look like and negotiating incrementally, and uh, just kind of how to put it together and get your clients the best deal. But I live by a code that I think that the best deals are the ones that are advantageous for everyone. And I think that we work in an industry where a lot of people think that it's a win or lose type of a thing, but it doesn't mean that there has to be a winner or a loser. Ideally, the best scenarios are those which everybody gets what they want. But it doesn't mean that you can't leverage what you know about what someone is looking for to make it advantageous for your client as well. Because at the end of the day, you represent your client. And as Brent mentioned, we'll talk a little bit about how the NAR settlement has changed negotiating, because there is a level of negotiating that I think takes place with our clients as well. And so we'll talk about how we've been pushing through that. But first thing that we want to get into is really just the building of rapport. And Brent, if you want to step in here, and I know that you follow more of a "hey, how's it going" kind of approach to interacting with people. I tend to be a little bit more, I don't want to say scripted, but I'm a little bit more. It's not that I don't have energy. It's not that I'm not a very friendly person. I am a very, very friendly person, but I'm so like, hey, if I call somebody, if I call an agent on the other side, a listing agent, my initial reaction is to be like to just chum them up a little bit. It's just like, hey, it's Mike McCullough. I'm with this broker. I've got a client that's interested in your listing. Wanted to see if you had a few minutes to talk about it. And we'll just go right into questions. And I'll build a rapport that way, showing a curious mindset. But Brent, I'm curious how you build rapport, because I think that you are one of those types of people, and it works well for you where you actually build a good relationship with that person by being extremely friendly with them.
Yeah, and I think it's good for people to know that you are friendly. So it's
I'm a bitter, cynical human. No, I'm very friendly. I'm kind of calculated in that way. So
yes, you're more methodical, and I am definitely unscripted and shoot from the hip a little bit. I will say that, so I've been in this business since, I want to say I got my license in 2011. I feel like you've been in this business long enough when you stop remembering like what year you got licensed. So I'm at that point. It's like, how many years has it been? So I guess it's about to be like 14 years in the business this coming November. So um, that being said, although I feel like I'm good at being cordial and building rapport, I also can be emotional as well. And that's one of the things that I struggled with early on in my career. And real estate was my first sales job. And so I went from being like a web developer to a real estate agent. It's completely different. And I do remember, to give you, and we'll give some anecdotes during this. I do remember when I was first, was doing my first deal, and I got flustered with another agent, and she told me, "Why are you getting frustrated with me? I'm just the messenger here." And that was such a good wake up call. That was very early in my career. I mean, first couple months. And it stopped me. I remember that because I was living in Dallas and I was walking down the street as we do, you can do deals. We just had a guy on our team tell me that he's done several deals while sitting in a swimming pool. You just never know where you're going to be talking to people because we're on call basically. But I remember walking down the street and her calling me and me stopping dead in my tracks going, gosh, she is so right. Like, and I apologized to media. It's like, I don't know why I'm doing that. And I've taken that lesson that I've learned to heart, and I've kept that with me and shared it with people because it is important to me to build that trust and build that rapport in a friendly way. I am lighthearted, but I'm also a bulldog for my clients when I need to be, and I make sure that they understand that I'm only representing them. I've seen a lot of agents say things to me during transactions that would make me think like, okay, you're just trying to get a deal done. You're trying to figure this out and you're not really caring about what your clients, because when they tell you to do something, that's what you better be doing. And in Texas, we have more, since the NAR settlement, we have more checks and balances essentially. And we have a disclosure now with our listing agreements, what we're even allowed to say. And that's something that we should have always had, in my opinion, because I'm a broker and we're always supposed to have, hey, do you have any offers on this property? No, we don't have anything yet. Have you got permission to actually say that? Because you better have. Is it multiple? You may have a client that doesn't want people to know that. And then you're violating that fiduciary duty to your clients by not saying that correctly. So I know I'm getting off base a little bit there, but even when I go meet buyers for the first time to show them a house for the first time, I'm very lighthearted with my buyers on building that rapport. And they think I'm about to like drop this crazy knowledge bomb on them, like, hey, so before we go in, I just want to kind of give you just a little bit on what to expect and how I show homes. And it's like a deer in headlights. Like, oh man, here it goes. What is he about to tell me? And I always say, and I do this every time. I say, these are not my houses, and you're not going to hurt my feelings if you don't like them. And I usually get a chuckle. I use humor, and I say, guys, it's serious though. I've had times in the past where the clients looked at a house for the full hour, and I'm like, man, they love this house. And like, hey, are we writing up an offer? What's going on? That's like, no, we hate it. They didn't want to hurt my feelings. It's like my feelings don't care. I've also learned to not give your opinion as well because I put my foot in my mouth. I was like, this house is terrible. And then they said, we love it. And I just told them the house they loved was terrible. So learned that lesson very, very early on as well. And so, but with the other agents, for me, and I'll turn it back over to you, Michael, for the other agents, when I'm on the buyer side and I'm presenting an offer, I do usually say, it's like, hey, for what it's worth, I am very responsive. I answer emails quickly. I try to pick up my phone the best I can. And I'm very, very easy to work with. And I usually get a really good response from that. And it's almost like this defensive wall from the other side, from the listing agent, goes down. Sometimes they don't care. They're like, cool, whatever. And sometimes we're dealing with a listing coordinator and not even the agent. And we also have to remember sometimes these people just won't answer their phone and we don't get to do any of this. But on the buy side, I like to disarm people as much as I can. And then as the listing agent, when people are coming to me and I'm the listing agent and they're presenting an offer, I want them to be my best friend because I want them to submit that offer. But I also have to be careful what I'm divulging because I need to have permission to do that. And that rapport goes a long way. And I will say things like, hey, I just want, look, I want this to be a win-win. When I know that you represent your client and I represent mine. But at the end of the day, if both of them can walk away happy with a great sale and a great buy, then that's awesome for us, right? And they go, absolutely, that sounds great. And again, even on that side, it's very disarming, and it brings that it almost gets rid of some of the formality of like, hi, and again, Michael, you're Michael saying, hey, I'm so and so, I'm Michael with Real Broker, and I want to ask you some questions. He keeps it very formal. I'm the opposite. So, Michael, that's how I do it, and it seems to work, and the way you do it seems to work too.
And that's, I think, an interesting point because, when I say that I'm not scripted, I think people get concerned about being scripted. And I always lean in on, like, I would provide you a framework for how I think things should go. But ultimately, it's up to the individual to implement it and also to make it their own. I can't deliver a message the same way with the same effect that somebody else that has a different personality could. And sometimes what you're saying is as important as how you're saying it. But yeah, I think one thing that's interesting that I hadn't thought of until you actually just brought this up as it relates to the NAR settlement, because there was a real estate agent that got sued not too long ago for leaving feedback on a showing. And then that ended up being a factor in the negotiating on this deal. And because that agent had left the specific feedback on behalf of their client, but didn't have the approval from the client to do it, it harmed negotiating. So we have to mind our P's and Q's when it comes to these things. I do think that what you mentioned is that sometimes real estate agents won't answer. We are constantly interviewing amongst our peers and our contemporaries all the time, and how you represent yourself will play a factor, not just in that transaction, but future transactions. I mean, if you've done this long enough and you get somebody else on the other side of a deal that you've had a good relationship with, you kind of feel a sense of like confidence, like, oh, cool, I can call that person and have a really good conversation with them. Or, God, I remember that person never responded to questions or anything like that. So again, we have to keep that in mind. And if agents are calling you to try to have a conversation with you, it doesn't mean that you've got to share everything that's on your mind, because I think you do keep things close to the vest. But just that keeping communication up is just so critical. So I would say that part of it is interesting, but how I usually approach it is to say, like, guys, and I tell my clients this on one side or the other, but let me just take the stance of, like, I'm representing a buyer. I say, guys, look, the best deals are the ones where everybody gets what they want. It's advantageous for everybody. I don't want you to feel like this is a win or loss thing, but you're looking for certain things and they are looking for certain things. And we talk about a lot about lead conversion. Those same principles apply to finding out what you can to try to help things. And this is not a smoke and mirrors type of approach, because I've had people tell me that before. Oh, you're asking questions about somebody's motivation so that you can put some smoke and mirrors out there to get them to do the things that you want to do. No, it's not. It's about building relationships. And if I call a listing agent and I say, hey, I've got a client that's interested in your home, we're getting out and seeing it on Saturday. I don't do this with every showing, but I do it with the ones that my clients I know have an interest in it. And I say, I have to acknowledge, and again, how you represent yourself is so important to negotiating, because if you are representing a seller and you have multiple offers or just offers in general, and you're presenting that to your seller, how much of the interaction with that agent on the other side does factor into it, particularly in multiple offers? Because would a seller, if presented the same offer, but maybe one was, had a $2,000 higher net after closing versus one that had a $2,000 less net, but that agent really presented themselves well and gave me the impression that this is going to be a much easier transaction, does that carry enough value to negate that $2,000 difference? And so I try to make sure that I come off as that I'm very professional and that I know what I'm talking about and that I know what I'm looking at, so that that agent gets the sensation, hey, this person's going to be easy to work with, and maybe I can share information with them that I wouldn't somebody else. If you have a brand new agent that doesn't know what they're doing, there's probably a different type of conversation tone than someone that's done this for quite a while. So things like, hey, let me ask you a question about your house. If that was something in MLS, you should have done yourself a favor and looked at MLS first prior to giving them a call. But if I don't get the chance to look at MLS, I leave it intentionally vague where I say, what can you tell me about the home that I cannot see online? And so
Yeah.
I'll say things like that to try to get them to open up, like, oh, this person's doing the research. They know to look for seller disclosure. They need to know to look at things like that. But let me tell them something else. And then I'll actually ask the question. And again, when we go back to lead conversion, I say anytime that you have the opportunity to get the answers to the exam by just asking questions about what's on the exam, the better off you're going to be, because you can formulate your response based on what you've been given. Same sort of thing here. Guys, I can put together a really strong offer without looking at comps, without looking at anything else, based on what I'm finding out from a listing agent. Now, you'll have some that are closed off, but I think for the most part, they want to sell a house. They're happy to have a conversation. And so I'll call and I'll just say, what can you tell me about what I'm not seeing on the house? And then we'll ask the question, well, what is important to your seller? Obviously, bottom line is probably going to be the most important thing, but what's important to your seller? And that's when you start finding out, like, man, they could really use a lease back. They're going through a divorce, or they're going through this situation or that situation, whatever it is, like life-changing events, and maybe they need a little bit extra time. Maybe they need, so then as a buyer agent, I can convey that to my buyers to say, guys, if you're willing to do this to accommodate the emotional aspect of this transaction for the seller, that is going to win us a lot of points, as opposed to just throwing numbers at somebody. And so I try to find out what I can, and then go back to that buyer, and I just say, well, guys, here's what I understand about this. Let's get on a call. Let's look through the contract. Let's look at all of the myriad of things that are negotiating points based on what I know. Let me run through some scenarios with you, and let me get you, buyer, on the same page with me about how you're critically thinking through this contract. So calling and being methodical about what I'm finding out, it should come off as being friendly to that listing agent, but it is a very strategic move to find out what I can find so that I can be given the answers to the test without directly asking for it. Because the listing agent's not going to tell you, if you give an offer at this price point, you're going to get this house. Doesn't happen all the time because they're protecting their client. But you can find out a whole lot else about what you can include that offer that gets you the best opportunity to win that deal for sure.
Yeah. The that is one of those things that I hear so many times. And I get an anecdote from this past week. I got a haircut this past week. The guy who cuts my hair, his wife is a real estate agent, and they're neighbors of mine. And he said that he's always bragging about his wife, which I think is awesome. And he said that she just won a deal, and it was like 50,000 less. And the other listing agent called her and said, I want you to tell your clients, my sellers want me to tell you to tell your buyers that they got this deal because of you. That is, I mean, what a great thing to feel and to hear. But and her response was, I don't need to tell them that, like it's like, no, no, we want you to tell them. Like, then she's like, hey, I'm brag. She felt like it might have been bragging a little bit, but what a great feather in your cap, and what a great um, thing to say, with building rapport. Like, she's built such great rapport, and we hear that for ourselves, and we've all had deals like that we wanted. It's like, hey, I've got another one that's looks very similar. It's pretty close. We would rather work with you. Can you ask your seller if they'll come up, like, get rid of one thing, get rid of the home warranty, or come up $1,000, and we'll go with you. And it's like, because you built that rapport, that has won me a ton of deals. And I think that's smart. And the opposite of that is so true, where you talk to a buyer's agent who just has an attitude. I have gone to my sellers and said, hey, we've got this, and this. These are all similar. It's like, I can tell you that this person was very difficult on the phone. And that can win you or lose your deal. So take a deep breath. You may be having a bad day. There may be stuff going through your mind. And also, I will say that when you're dealing with your clients, and this is a little off topic, but you don't necessarily have to divulge everything. Like, if the other agent is being a pain in the butt, you don't need to tell them that, because that can just create animosity on your side of the table that really doesn't need to be there. And there's a lot of times when people say, well, why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? And a lot of times I have to remind my buyers or my sellers, like, hey guys, there's a good chance that it's not even the buyer or the seller that's even making these comments. This is just coming from a hostile real estate agent. And so, like, well, I don't even want to work with them anymore. It's like, guys, you have to remember, these people don't come with the house. Like, so it's not a big deal. But this is a very emotional thing. So to be calm, and what do they say in Pulp Fiction? Be cool. What's Fonzie like? Be cool. So gotta be cool, and go from there. So yeah, I think that's great. And I think everyone on this call has had this exact same thing happen. So everybody's probably like, yeah, totally.
To take another pop culture um, reference is, at the end of the day, so one of the things that I typically do after a transaction, even if it did not go well, and I make it a point to bring it up to this agent once we've gotten past like the option period, or we've gotten pretty close to close. Basically, once I know that we're in the clear, is we'll ask them if they have a Google review page or someplace where I can leave them a review. And they're so flattered by that, like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And I will be honest and just say, hey, I want to leave you a review. I'm committed to us all building up our business and our community together, and I want to help one another out. And so I try to do those little things like that. But to take from the movie Roadhouse, you can be nice until a point to not be nice. And even though it's not a personal thing, there are times where you take that leverage and use it to your advantage to get the deal done, or a better deal for your client. For example, last week I uh, had a house that we were working through option, and this person's parents got involved, and we all know the funny memes about parents getting involved. We had the standard third party inspection. We had 3 additional inspections that had to take place, but I strategically made sure, first of all, I have to schedule showings. So if they see 4 inspections getting scheduled, I have to schedule those for those other vendors specifically, because they're not real estate agents with super access. But I made sure to call the agents to say, hey, I'm making you aware that there were some things that came up on the third party inspection. I don't want to talk about them now. However, I'm letting you know that I'm going to have 3 different vendors come in and view this house for us to double check on some things. Automatically, they're preparing themselves for me to ask for something. It's like beyond just like normal, like GFCI outlets or small little things. Like, there are some serious legitimate concerns, and I'm dropping that into your brain right now. Had these different folks come out. Now, this house is terminated 4 times before we contracted, and we had written a backup offer that got accepted, and just so happens that it kicked in because another agent terminated. And when that listing agent called me and explained the context behind why that most recent agent terminated, or buyer terminated, I just was like, I empathize with you. It sucks, but I can't imagine a world where that agent didn't push on getting things done with this house. And the seller agent said, "Hey, I assure you that this seller wants to get these things done." So again, I'm being very nice, but I'm also building up leverage because I now know that I have a lot of things in my back pocket that I could pull out, like spade cards. And one of the things that we talk about is negotiating incrementally. So I will sometimes temper expectations with clients and say, "Look, I know we want this and this and this. I want to know what's the priority first. And are there some other things that we can continue to, but let's not overwhelm them initially. Let's go into it with this, but then let's have this in our back pocket and continue to go from there." And so we get the house checked out, and I'm talking to the buyers and his parents, and I'm like, "Guys, look, we're going to ask for $20,000 just straight up in concessions. I don't even think I have to show documentation to justify what we're asking for." And this seller in one of the transactions had already replaced all three of the HVAC condenser units and air handlers, had already done foundation work. So they'd already pumped in more than $30,000 into this house that they're trying to net the most amount of money. And they're like, "Do you think that they'll go for it?" I'm like, "I don't think that this is going to be a tough conversation at all." And so when I called the agent, I didn't send the amendment outright. I said, "Hey, I want to talk to you before I send this over to you. I want to let you know that we're going to ask for $20,000 in concessions." And you could hear the kind of gasp over the phone. And I'm like, "I want to explain something to you. There's legitimate reason why we're asking for what we're asking for, but I want to remind you that this house has terminated 4 times behind this. You know that we want to get this done. The clients really love the house, but I expect this is a very easy conversation for you to have with your list, with your seller." And she's like, "Well, let me call him." And within 5 minutes, I got a call back. "We'll do it, $20,000. And it was simple as that. So I'm planting seeds ahead of time to prepare you for this. So it's not shocking, but that I've done my due diligence. I've done my research. I'm interviewing with you this whole time. So when I come to you with something, it's valid. But you've already shared with me the pain points that your seller has. They just want to get this done. So put your money where your mouth is." And it was very easy. I've had very contentious negotiations in that time, and you have to remind them, "Hey, I want to remind you that if we terminate on this, you're going to have to go back to market, and that's going to bother your seller. Why not get it done? Can you put a price tag on peace of mind moving forward? Because you know that we're good for it." So again, it's being nice, and it's knowing when to push the pedal and when to ease off. And when I say negotiating incrementally, the buyer wanted to know about the washer, dryer, and refrigerator. I said, "Let's ask for that $20,000 first, but then we'll come back around to that when it comes to something else." And I didn't even need leverage. I just called the agent back. I was like, "Hey, we kind of nudged that. Do you think that because we're going to be able to make this super easy from here, do you think your seller would be willing to part and convey the washer, dryer, and fridge?" It's like, "Let me ask." Call me right back. "Sure, we'll go ahead and do it." So then in addition to concessions to take care of all the buyer's concerns, then you get 3 extra appliances that are probably saving them $5,000 or $6,000. And it's all about just that building a rapport, understanding what the needs are, just like lead conversion, because there's a level of conversion here, understanding getting the answers to the test, and then applying it in actual specific scenarios.
Yeah. And kind of want to shift gears a little bit here because I do want to get into the NAR stuff and how we've been negotiating that. But I think there's some no duh things when it comes to this, and that anyone listening to this, like, yeah, you're not telling us anything we don't know already. Like talking about market knowledge and stuff like that. Like, yeah, we need to know what we're talking about. I have had where I was showing houses again early in my career in Dallas, where I had a husband wife. She was more like me, super laid back, joking around. The husband very analytical. So it is a good thing to remember to be a chameleon and try to assess people's personality types. And I was showing houses literally in my neighborhood. I knew every house that was on the market. I knew what they were listed for. I knew them. And what he needed me to do was show him the numbers, though. And that's one of those things where he just said, you need to show me this. And so having that market knowledge is great. I knew the comps, but people need to see the comps. So one of those things that Michael talks about in his virtual appointments, we talk about, hey, lead conversion. What if I could show you a way that we can get your rate bought down? And he shows it in MLS to people. It's like, hey, you see my name on this one? You see where it says I got them $24,000 in seller concessions to do a 2-1 buy down. Like, whoa, it's not just him saying it, like, because I could say it all day long. He's showing them the actual thing. Now, I will say that when it comes to negotiating, being educated, not just as a real estate agent in the market knowledge, but also being educated, being able to put your appraiser hat on, to be able to put your lender hat on, and to know that would know what you're talking about with insurance and things like that. And look, we're not the experts in those things. Now, some of us could have a dual license or something like that, but we can still think like an appraiser. One of the deals I'm doing right now, I'm concerned about it is VA, which I love working VA deals. I love veterans, um, but it's going to be a tight appraisal. It is. We're listed high, and they're coming in right under list price. And I asked him what he thought about the appraisal, and he said, "Well, the third car garage." And I said, "Well, what do you think that garage is worth?" And he said, "Probably $10,000." And that told me right away that he knows what he's talking about. And that's good because $10,000, $15,000 is probably what an appraiser is going to do. But to be able to do that and talk intelligently, not just negotiating with the other side, but negotiating what your offer needs to be and understanding those types of things. Michael, do you have anything you want to add to that and any other things? Because when we jump into the NAR thing, I think that's probably where we'll wrap up.
No, I just love putting a bow on it with what you just said. It's like having the knowledge. Like it is embarrassing, and I've been there. I think a lot of us have been there where you're confident in what you're about to say, but an agent on the other side that knows a little bit more about you kind of calls you out on it, and it's like a little bit humiliating. But at the same time, confidence comes off so much. Like you can hear a smile, you can hear confidence through a phone. And if you've done the work and you understand the market, you've looked at things, it makes it easier to, in essence, plead your case, if you will. But no, I agree. I don't think that we're reinventing the wheel. It's just these are the things that work for us, and I'm sure everybody's got a way that it works for them. But um, I've just found that negotiating when you understand what you're working against, it becomes so much easier. But yeah, let's shift gears. Let's talk about the NAR stuff.
Yeah, and I think that I'm wearing a real broker shirt. Work hard, be kind. There you go. Just keep that in mind. So, um, commissions. Okay, so NAR settlement, all that. I think we already are. Well, hey, we get those texts. Are you offering any compensation? I want to show the house. What are you paying? Those are things in Texas that you have to have permission to answer. How are you able to answer those? And again, you should have had those permissions anyway. It used to be an MLS, so that was fine. I'm seeing if anyone's on lab coat agents, I'm seeing people like complaining about Compass and how that hey their website has the compensation on it. It's like, yeah, they're allowed to do that. They just can't have it in MLS. And so it's like, hey, that's a brokerage thing, you know what I mean? So there's ways to find it. We could put it on our own website if we wanted to. What I'm doing personally is I don't ask because I have a rep agreement, and my rep agreement, I hold people to it. And we have that conversation up front. Now, when I negotiate my listings, hey, what do you charge? It's a very easy question. This NAR settlement has made it easier, in my opinion, on the listing side of things if you're the one taking the listing. Because I can say, and this is what we should have always been saying, and I'm not saying I haven't been saying this, but my fee is 3%. What we really need to be talking about is, are we offering any compensation to the other agent that's going to be bringing the buyer? There is the other scenario of, maybe we hold an open house and someone does come in unrepresented. We need to talk about what that looks like too. So I have a listing right now where my fee is 3%. The other side is 2.5%. If I find the buyer, it's 5% for me. So yay, open houses if I can make that work. 2.5%. There are people now. I also hold a license in Florida. I've never done anything with it, so it's up for renewal. I'm probably just gonna let it expire because I don't want to do it. And I was told by my broker buddy there, he's like, if it wasn't a 50-50 co-broke, like that wasn't cool. That's not kosher to do that. That's just how they roll in Florida. And so for this deal to me getting 3 and them getting 2.5, well, it's a $1.2 million house. You're going to be okay. And that's what my seller agreed to do. Fast forward, I'm gonna give you guys just a couple scenarios. I've got another one right now, and this one just happened last week. So I do, and again, I don't ask for compensation. This agent didn't ask what the compensation was either. And he submitted an offer on one of my listings, and again, it's 2.5%. And she is all about the net. She was okay with my 3%. She was not. And I am making sure that I'm telling, it's like, hey, agent's going to ask, and the expectation for a lot of these agents is 3%. It's like you can do whatever you want to do. Now, when an agent does call me and ask me what it is, if I have permission to say, I'll say it. It's like, hey, it's 3%, whatever. That usually ends the conversation. But let's say for this conversation, it's 2.5%. Say, listen, it's 2.5%, but write whatever you want into the offer. You have a buyer's rep. It could be 10% as long as the numbers work for my seller. And of course, I've got permission to say that type of stuff. But if it's a $400,000 house and you offer it and you want 10% commission and you're offering us 500,000, they're probably going to take it. So we can negotiate that. And so he gave me an offer at 3%. And I had to go back to him and say, hey, listen, it's 2.5%. I said, but let's work out the rest. And so we did. And we worked out the rest. And it came down to it. I'm just going to give you our real numbers. We were at 485. Their offer was 480, asking for $5,000 towards seller contribution. And it was still at 3%. And then he came back and my client said, hey, why don't we meet in the middle? Let's do 480, no contribution. And his comment was, and I had built great rapport with him. And he's very educated and he's been great to work with. And he said, I don't see how that's meeting in the middle through text message. And so I immediately called him. He immediately answered. And I said, hey, I'm not sure how this isn't meeting in the middle. You came in 10,000 net less than our offer price, and we're coming back at 5. That's exactly meeting in the middle. And his comment was, yeah, but it's 2.5%. And I said, immediately I'm like, this is about your commission. And this is where we need to be careful, right? Because we have a fiduciary duty to our clients. And so he had come back and he says, well, will you see if they'll do 2,500? And I immediately, while I'm talking to him, calculated what's 480,000 times 0.5%, $2,400. So it had nothing to do with his buyers needing any contribution, and it had everything to do with his commission. And he started to get a little contentious. And he said, well, you don't know how much work I've had to do. And this just comes out of your marketing budget, this and that. And I said, well, it's what's in the listing agreement. And I didn't take it any further than that. And I said, and then he kind of got a little more contentious. And when I say contentious, he's fighting for his clients and for his commission, because when he knows that his clients are going to make up that other 0.5%, he needs to fight for that so they don't have to pay it. And I think he is doing his job, and he's doing it very admirably. But I will say that I did make the comment. It's like, well, if you'd like to call your clients and tell them they can't get this house because of your 0.5%, then that's a conversation I wouldn't love having. And he goes, well, I'm not going to do that. And that basically ended the conversation. So they came back and accepted. And so that's just one of those things where it's still a touchy subject with the NAR settlement. And Michael, I'll let you give your own anecdote if you have any or thoughts on that. I just think that I like to pre-negotiate with my sellers the ability to tell people what the commission is and just get ahead of it, and making sure that you're having real conversations like, hey, if we're offering nothing, it may be tough to sell your house, because agents don't work for free. We don't go to work for free. And, hey, I don't think, and you're going to have FISBOs who say we're just dumb agents and we don't know what we're doing. But sure, you can list my house for 2%, but I'm not gonna pay the other side. That's gonna be a fun one. That's gonna be a tough negotiating. So it's just case by case. So far, it has been pretty darn easy. The changes that they've made on our contracts, I feel like they change almost daily. So we're having to stay up. Like the ink's not even dry and they're changing them again. So I don't think this is going to settle. I think that there are a couple brokerages out there like Compass, and I'm not saying any of this negatively, but they're pushing the envelope on clear cooperation and things like that with their and so we're going to continue to see changes within our industry. And I do think though this whole NAR settlement has really blown over and it's kind of gone. But what it has forced agents to do is do their job within the boundaries of compliance on what they were supposed to be doing from the beginning. How many people were showing houses without a buyer rep? I would guess 90% of them. I mean, and now you're not supposed to do that. Are they still doing it? I'm sure they are. Have I had brokers text me and email me in writing that if it wasn't 3%, they weren't going to show it? Wow, you were playing a dangerous game putting that stuff in writing. So, anyway, get off my high horse there. Cut it over to you, Michael.
I think the one thing about the NAR settlement that's changed a lot of this stuff is that it's just a more open conversation, whereas before it seemed like the agents would handle it. Now buyers and sellers are getting a lot more involved in that conversation. And it's a good thing that they are. And I actually use those virtual consultations most of the time to clear up any questions about it. And I actually try to acknowledge it and provide context when I know that I'm competing against other agents. So, for example, we work with Dave Ramsey as one of our lead providers. And every time that I've talked to one over the last few months, they're just getting told, they're telling me that one of the first things that's happening is that everybody's just pushing a buyer's representation agreement in their face. And that then becomes the most important thing in a conversation as opposed to why somebody's wanting to move and make a move. And so I say, well, let's spend some time on a call to understand what it is that you're looking to do and what we can do to help you out, put a plan in place, but also clarify anything that has to do there. If I don't get the opportunity to do that, then I am getting short form buyer's representations done. I don't know if across the board every state's doing those, but we're doing them in Texas. So you can do a short form that breaks it down by showing services or full services. And then you have your long form buyer's representation agreement. If I get a short form done, I have to have a long form done eventually for compliance with my broker because we can't write in a transaction fee on the short form. So I make sure to talk about all of this stuff and then tell these folks if I'm using a short form, hey guys, if we move forward and I have the opportunity to work for you, then we'll talk a little bit about this and we'll talk about it. It's just I have something signed to allow me to show, but I'll talk to them about that compensation and how all that works. I've not encountered a lot of houses that are not doing 3%. But the scenario that you mentioned, Brent, what's interesting about that is that that agent had better make sure that they're clarifying and articulating how it's going to work at closing very well, because what it sounds like is you can have this scenario now in the 1-4 where you have to differentiate based on the listing agreement who's responsible for paying the buyer agent. Is it broker to broker? Is it broker to owner? And if it's broker to broker, and then that agent's negotiating a concession out of the seller to pay for basically a gap in compensation, then they better articulate to their buyer, like, all this means on that concession is that that's that much less that you're taking to the closing table. So if you're not reminding them of that, then who's to say that they go to closing and it's out of sight, out of mind, that they don't know to sit there and specifically cut you a check or how they're going to handle it. So the paperwork and coordination of it is a little bit different, but I have not had to encounter that much. The only time that I've really seen it happen most often is in different markets, different builders do different things. And I think Dallas or DFW is one of the only markets where Lennar as a builder, not to disparage them, it's not that, but they typically only pay 1% on buyer agent commission. So locally, going into that situation, what's going to be the case. But I guess they made a change with this settlement to where now their lenders and underwriters are asking for copies of the buyer's representation agreement that has the percentage written into it. And I had an example where I was sitting with a sales agent in front of the buyers, and I asked the sales agent, I said, hey, and this is a part of negotiating. Builders, like if you ask, the worst that they're going to say is no, but man, you'd be surprised what you can get out of builders right now. But I said, hey, have you guys got any sort of a move-in package or appliance package you guys can extend to my clients? And the sales agent took a second, looked at me, looked at the client and said, do you have a buyer's representation agreement signed? I'm like, yes, absolutely. He goes, what is it? And I said, it's 3%. And he looks at the buyers and he tells them, guys, I could throw out some sort of like package like that potentially, but the dollar value on it is going to be greater than the 2% gap that we've got to make up or you've got to make up to pay him. So that sales agent took the liberty to, I want to say, take my side. It wasn't about that. He basically said, guys, you're screwed on getting appliances because you have to pay this guy. So we're going to extend a concession to him and not you. So that's the only time that I think with this NAR settlement, because the clients are a little bit more in tune with what's going on, how can you, I guess, settle any nerves that they may have that this is going to be a part of the negotiating process? And how do I know that you as an agent are going to represent me best for what I want to do? And are you going to interject your concern about getting paid into this transaction? Because basically at the end of the day, do I have to be worried as a buyer that I'm not going to be able to buy the house that I want because there's not enough compensation in this deal for you? And that's going to be an interesting conversation that I think that we have not gotten to because the market hasn't been that busy. But perhaps when we get to a busier market, it will become easier for buyers to accept the fact that they may have to pay those differences. But that's all in the conversation and how you negotiate that with your buyer and setting proper expectations. So I hope that that agent set proper expectations with their buyers on that, because if they didn't, then who's to make sure that it gets done? And, for folks like VA, if I've got a VA buyer, one of the attractive things about VA is that they're not paying a down payment. If I'm going to show you a house that I know is only going to pay 1%, how could I reasonably ask that you pay that difference if the most important thing to you about your loan is that you're not having to pay a down payment? So you gotta make sure you come to an understanding and make sure, like that they're on the same page with how this works with you. But it's added that layer in it, but overwhelmingly, we have not encountered that. And to be honest with you, I tell most buyers that I'm working with right now, if they don't pay that difference, if they don't pay 3%, we have it written in there. Am I going to ask for that difference? Maybe not, but we'll figure it out. We'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. Yeah, so I look, these are all different negotiating tactics. I think that the NAR part is the most interesting part because a lot of these things I think are things that we all as agents do already. But I think it's also important that those of you that are listening to this are saying that, yeah, I do all this already. But we also work with and have had experiences with a lot of agents who don't. Now, we're probably the ones who sell the houses. Our a lot of times people ask us who our competition is, and it's not the next $50 million agent. That's not your competition. Your competition is the person who sells 2 houses a year because there's 30,000 of them in Dallas. So it's the stay-at-home mom or dad, or the people who need the part-time job that just want to do those. That's our competition, and a lot of those people aren't very educated. So we have to be able to prepare ourselves, and we need to be educated on both sides of that transaction to where we're able to educate the other side as well. So with that being said, again, I want to remind everyone, first off, thank you so much for everybody being here again. And we're not going to have, because of spring break next week, we will not have a call next week. And yeah, that's what we got for today. So we'll see y'all next time. Thanks, everybody.
Before you all close, it's Omar. Hey, I just want to say I appreciate this
Yeah.
conversation today, man. Let me move my screen thing. This was a meaty one right here. This is a
Really?
that really got into a lot of the intricate things that take place when you're actually doing the negotiating and things to consider along the way. So I just wanted to say I just had to come off just to say this. This was a good one. It helped me quite a bit just to look at different scenarios and situations, especially as we enter into the spring season, which I know I just got a new agreement just yesterday, and so
Nice.
working on this. So just different things to be thinking about along the way, especially,
Yeah.
I've been in business for a year, almost a year now, and so yeah, this is very helpful for me as I continue to learn and grow along the way. So yeah, I
Well,
appreciate.
I'm glad to hear that, and it's good to hear that feedback. And I will say that we never need to stop learning and growing and developing as not just as real estate agents, but as people, and realizing that this is a high emotion involvement with everybody. And there's times where I've been griped at by my clients. I'm like, oh man, they're never going to talk to me again. And then I'll call them like, oh Brent, what's going on, man? And it's like they were just having a tough time. It was stressful. And so we just never know. Even when you're calling somebody for the first time, you may have called them on a bad day. So all of that and the negotiating and just keeping your cool, it goes a long way. And being kind goes a long way. And like I said, work hard, be kind, right? I like that hat on more. Um, but yeah, so good stuff. Thank you so much, and we appreciate that feedback. That's a great compliment.
Indeed, indeed. And I could find this, I don't know if I've asked this. These you I don't send them out. But if I want to review, I know I think it stopped recording after about 30 minutes, but
I think that a note taker stops after 30 minutes. I think we do record the whole thing.
let's have a good
So,
okay.
but Jen puts them on. We have a YouTube channel that Michael and I have, and I'll get her to send the link out. No problem.
All right, good deal. Yeah, because there was some things that were said in this one. It's like, yeah, let me go back. I was taking notes as best I could. Like this is one. It's like, let me go back and watch this a couple times. Yeah. So
Cool. That's awesome. I love hearing that. All right. Yeah, we'll get that out to you. I'll tell Jen right now. I'm looking right at her. So
Um,
I'll get off this call and go tell her.
all right. Appreciate
Omar, if you feel like you need one off because of something like that, you need to go a little bit deeper into it. Um, just shoot one of us an email, and I mean, I'm happy to take some time out. Um, Brent's obviously really busy too, but if you feel like you need a deeper dive because you've been on most of these calls on any of the subject matter, just reach
Yeah.
out. My email is mccullough@brentgermanyteam.com. Brent's is brent@brentgermanyteam.com. Um, so if you can't find the recordings, if there is something that you want to revisit or get into, please don't hesitate.
okay. Indeed.
All right, guys. Y'all have a good rest of your week.
You too.
See ya.